A secret message carved onto a wall. A coded note passed in the dead of night. A love letter written in a language known only to the recipient. Codes and hidden language are a staple of entertainment and culture, and their usage goes far back into the mists of time. Is it possible to write a code that will never truly be solved, however? And are there those who have actually managed to do it? Codes, ciphers, and cryptograms, and the methods with which to break those secret messages have been a part of human history since before the advent of writing. Likely, the use of hidden terms and signals is at least as old as communication and speech itself, with scores of millennia to develop the processes of hiding the contents of a communication from unwanted eyes, along with the recent acceleration in the development of mathematics, machine learning, and of course artificial intelligence. Codes are now far more sophisticated than ever before. But they also play a larger part in a greater number of people's lives than at any other time in history. Today, let's take a look at the intriguing development of supposedly unbreakable codes and the people that solved them, as well as some of the mysteries that remain unresolved by even the most astute minds. But before we embark on a dive into the world of code breaking, if you're interested in early access to videos and live chats with the creator of Intrigued Mind, consider subscribing to our Patreon. Your support will greatly help us keep the channel producing more intriguing content. In what remains the foundational text of cryptology historiography, David Kahn noted the importance that the science of cryptology has in real-world events. Writing in the late 1960s, he noted that even though the history of Second World War Allied cryptology departments were still very much shrouded behind layers of government secrecy, it was estimated that American cryptologists working against the Japanese Empire had shortened the length of the conflict in the Pacific by at least a year, even accounting for the invention of the atomic bomb. In a similar fashion, though Kahn was yet to learn the details of the British war effort against German codes, famously handled by the supposedly unbreakable Enigma machine, he noted that British intelligence had employed more than 30,000 people in its cryptology efforts, undoubtedly shortening the conflict in the Western Hemisphere, as it happened in the Eastern War against the Japanese. Indeed, cryptology's use in government, war, and international regulations goes back to the very beginnings of recorded history. For instance, Kahn relates how a tomb constructed in Manat Khufu, ancient Egypt, for a local nobleman named Numhotep II displays hieroglyphics unknown in any other inscription and wholly unique to that 4,000-year-old burial place. Many motivations have been offered for the scribe's intentions in carving the code, which is yet to be broken, ranging from the desire to show off his skill to giving the inscription a more formal or official tone, or perhaps merely to amuse the literate visitors who would visit the grave. Whatever the reason for this first code, it most certainly fulfilled Numhotep's wish, never to be forgotten. The use of codes in different forms continued through the following centuries, sometimes using subterfuge rather than deception, as the world's first historian, Herodotus, related in his works recounting events in early classical Greece and the Middle East. Herodotus tells us that an official would shave a slave's head, tattoo a message on their scalp, and then send the slave to the recipient once the hair had grown thick enough to conceal the message's contents. As Kahn relates in Codebreakers, this is an example of steganography rather than cryptology, wherein the existence of the message is concealed rather than jumbled and rendered unintelligible to anyone other than its intended audience. In the vocabulary of the art, the original message itself is known as plain text. Cryptography is the transformation of the plain text into a form that is hopefully unintelligible to outside forces. One form of cryptography is transposition, which mixes the letters of the plain text into a disassembled order, effectively an anagram. Substitution, on the other hand, uses letters, numbers, or symbols to replace the original letters of the plain text, and it requires the use of an alternative or cipher alphabet. Transposition and substitution can both be used in the same message. The service of the Navajo Windtalkers of the United States Armed Forces during the Second World War provides a good historical example of the use of both these encryption methods. Not only did the Windtalkers use substitute words from their language for specific military terms, such as describing platoons as mud clans and submarines as iron fish, for example, they created a unique phonetic alphabet in order to spell out words with no appropriate or agreed equivalent. This double encoding created an impenetrable deception that remained impervious to enemy intelligence forces. One of the first unbreakable codes was thought to be the system used by the Roman general Julius Caesar, who wrote his letters in a substitution system, where he replaced each letter of the message with another from 3 places down in the alphabet. In this case, A would become D, B would become E, and so on. Caesar's heir, Augustus, used a similar system, And even though the secret of the code became known as early as the 2nd century AD, where it was explained by the Roman writer Suetonius, it was not until the 10th century that the Arabic polymath al-Kindi devised a systematic approach to breaking the codes built on variations of the Caesar cipher. He was building on the work of his predecessor, al-Khalil ibn Ahmad al-Farahidi, who in the 8th century had published Kitab al-Muamma, or the Book of Cryptographic Messages. Both al-Farahidi and al-Kindi used frequency analysis to decipher codes, with al-Kindi writing that one had to count the most commonly recurring letters or symbols, and then working back to the second most common, and so on. Once the codebreaker knows the language of the plaintext, it should be a simple process of elimination to discover which letter was which and decipher the message. Codes and ciphering became more sophisticated as the centuries continued, and by the time of the Renaissance, all of the major states and kingdoms of European power politics were making use of coded messages to communicate with allies as well as plot against enemies. The Venetian Giovanni Soro was made cipher secretary for the Italian Republic in the 16th century, and his talent and dedication to solving ciphers ensured that Venice remained in the foremost of the European powers far longer than its limited resources would have allowed otherwise. Mary, Queen of Scots, had a cipher system which she thought unbreakable. She used it in her correspondence plotting for the overthrow of Elizabeth I of England and her own seizure of the throne with the support of Philip II of Spain. Mary did not realize, however, that all of her letters were seized and read by Elizabeth's minister, Francis Walsingham, as well as his assistant, Thomas Phillips, who possessed the ability to solve ciphers in 4 different languages. Phillips used frequency analysis to pin down the symbols and letters substituted in what Mary thought was her impenetrable code, and when he had deciphered what became known as the Bloody Letter, containing incontrovertible proof that Mary was plotting against Elizabeth, he sent it to Walsingham in an envelope marked with a gallows. Mary, Queen of Scots, was beheaded on the 8th of February, 1587. In spite of the centuries of theoretical and practicable work done to solve puzzles and codes of every description, there are many ciphers that remain unexplained. For example, if you watched intrigued minds look back at the wonders of alchemy, you'll know that those early scientists and inventors wrote almost all of their findings and discoveries in code. Much of this has been translated or deciphered, but the Voynich manuscript is one example of a medieval codebook that no one has yet unraveled. Beautifully illustrated and over 240 pages, the manuscript has been dated to the 15th century and was once thought to have been in the possession of Rudolf II, the Holy Roman Emperor. The manuscript passed through various hands until it came into the possession of the Jesuit order in Rome, where it appears to have stayed for at least 2 centuries. It was purchased by the Polish antiquarian and book dealer Wilfrid Voynich during a sale of the order's library catalog in 1912, from whom it takes its modern name, and he spent some years trying to find a cryptologist to decipher its contents. Though it contains a few scattered phrases of Latin and German, almost all of the manuscript's near 40,000 words are in a completely unknown language or code. Voynich himself was of the opinion that the book was the work of the medieval English philosopher and scientist Roger Bacon, many of whose works and interests were considered to be heretical by the authorities of his time. In order to avoid prosecution or sanction by his own order of the Franciscans, it was thought that Bacon wrote his theories and findings in a complex code. However, despite more than a century of work to uncover the meaning of the Voynich manuscript, and even the use of modern 21st century computer decryption methods, no one has yet to find a definitive answer to the book's mystery. A slightly more recent case of an unsolvable conundrum posed by a well-known genius is that of the Elgar puzzler. Edward Elgar was an English composer whose work has become associated with Britain and its empire at the very height of its imperial power and confidence. His piece, Pomp and Circumstance March No. 1, is now better known by the title Land of Hope and Glory, and is instantly recognizable as the soundtrack to millions of North American graduation ceremonies and probably the same number of British sporting events. As well as composing intricate musical pieces, Elgar was an aficionado of puzzles and codes, and one such code that he sent to his friend Dorabella Penny in the summer of 1897 has mystified any potential cryptologists who have attempted to decipher it. Containing 87 characters derived from at least 24 symbols over 3 lines, the puzzler was first published in Dorabella Penny's memoirs in the late 1930s, but has never been transcribed or explained. Not for nothing did the Germans reportedly name their famous Enigma machine after Elgar's 1899 work, Variations on a Theme, better known as the Enigma Variations. Many of the best puzzles are those that are hiding in plain sight of the public. One of the most interesting is located at the headquarters of the CIA in Langley, Virginia, on a monument that invites any who view it to break its code. Kryptos, as the piece is known, was designed and sculpted by James Sanborn. an American artist whose work often includes allusions to invisible forces of science and nature. Kryptos is a work in copper that contains 1,735 letters divided into 4 sections. Since the piece was erected in 1990, 3 of the 4 sections are thought to have been solved using a variety of methods due to the different systems Sanborn incorporated to construct the code, but the 4th remains unexplained. Sanborn has interacted with online groups who are working to decipher the message, and intelligence agencies like the NSA have stated publicly that some of their members have solved the puzzle. But as of 2023, there has been no public announcement, and the 4th section of Kryptos remains a matter of debate. Sanborn has gone on to create other cryptographic works in various locations since his first piece for the CIA, and such is its influence that allusions and details from Kryptos have moved over into mainstream culture, most notably when the author Dan Brown included references to it on the cover of his best-selling book, The Da Vinci Code, in 2003. From ancient Egypt through Greece, Rome, and Elizabethan England, and onto the 21st century, codes have fascinated and enthralled intrigued minds with their mystery and challenge. This has been only a brief introduction into the wonders of codes and cryptology. So, for more videos on the most amazing forgotten parts of our history, be sure to subscribe to the Intrigued Mind channel, like the video, and leave your suggestions in the comments below.